We start at a fancy dinner, as the evil straight white male capitalist John Prince discusses investing in some up-and-coming big pharma company, but soon gets embarrassed in front of his new business partners by his obnoxious son, Cher, who then starts playing some hip-hop piano tune which transitions us into another one of them cringy rap videos. And the Asian mayor totally bollocks that flat-chested ginger sheriff with a fuck ton of freckles, because she just can't believe that the department's officers are out here shooting civilians, harassing an entire neighbourhood and wasting a whole fleet of drones under her watch. And says if you don't stop letting the sheriff's department look like total mugs and spunking taxpayers' money up the wall on endless drone replacements, then you're going to be out of a job, son. Naturally, said flat-chested ginger sheriff with a fuck ton of freckles just can't be having that. So the next day, she goes and has dinner with the evil white capitalist bloke and literally lets her hair down. And after waffling on about her tragic backstory as an orphan dumpster baby and who also fatally poisoned her childhood bully as a kid, she tells Princey Boy to up the pressure on the Sherwood residents already, so they can totally blame the hood and then make the community turn against him and shit. Later, a poorly Tressie pops some pills and then tells her daughters that she wants to get back out there and do some more nuisance protests. Despite the last time she did that, she got shot up by the local filth and totally paralysed for her troubles. No! So Robyn says, relax bro, because the hood will totally fight off that naughty Prince bloke what totally wants to buy up the grotty Sherwood estate because reasons. But Tressie says, stop talking about underwritten plot points and go get me some more pills, bitch. But shockingly, Robyn discovers that the local chemist has upped their prices worse than my local fish shop. I mean, 13 quid for a piece of cod on its own and without even including chips? Liberties! But the Asian pharmacist says there ain't nothing she can do. Cause although she agrees it's a fucking piss take how this only affects Sherwood residents, this is a contractual policy what comes straight from the manufacturer called Thanasia. So the hood soon regroup and watch the local news, where the naughty big pharma CEO from the opening scene says he has no choice but to raise the prices given his shops and staff need protection from the naughty hood fellas who have upped the crime stats in the area with their criminal antics. And the prices for all their medications can go back down again if the residents just nut up and snitch on the outlaws and stuff. And before you can say, I can't believe every bad guy in this show is a fucking Caucasian, the local community discuss whether they should indeed turn the hood in, given they're a bunch of troublemakers going around joyriding in stolen motors and trashing innocent surveillance drones owned by state police. But Tressie says snitches get stitches, bro, and we're totally nothing like GB News selling out our own people at the first sign of pressure. But before she can finish formulating a plan, she comes over a little woozy, and much like my lardy ass mate Diabetic Dave, she's so unfit she passes out while sitting down.
Okay.
Turns out she really needs her blood thinning meds, given she's out of tablets and the local pharmacy are charging redonkulous prices for a pack of painkillers. Whilst over at Big Pharma HQ, the naughty baddies are totally gloating at how well their plan is working to force the local residents to turn in a gang of teenage troublemakers what the full force of the state sheriff department apparently can't apprehend. And back at the Hood's HQ, Robyn worries that maybe doing all that breaking and entering and then committing grand larceny might not quite make them the good guys after all. And maybe they should just pack it in and totally surrender to the freckly sheriff already. But little John just says stop being a pussy, old girl, because our techie boy Tuck has come up with a plan to do some more breaking and entering and totally rob the big pharma company. And after the writers make an immature joke about anal penetration like a right bunch of children, they go on to have the independent female girl boss, what don't need no man, totally emasculate another of her male officers by getting him all hot and horny and then making him kneel. Because stunning and brave feminism, bro. And because getting all those pesky investigations dropped in internal affairs off his back now means she totally owns him, she promptly abuses her position of power and shags him for shits and giggles.
Nice.
Later, Jill totally bollocks her mum for working when she's supposed to be resting. Though what her official job is anyone's guess, given all we know about this broad is that she's a nuisance activist what loves getting paralysed. And Jill then hilariously compares her own mother to a friggin' freight train. And no, it's not because she now travels on metal wheels and her interior is full of a dozen loads on the weekends.
Matron.
But more that they couldn't stop her if they tried. Anyway, we then cut to yet another woman emasculating a male character just for simply caring about her. And before you can say, this room is 90% hair and why do they both go to the same shit barber, the gang sneak into Thanasia HQ to totally enact their vague yet cunning plan. But Robyn gets instantly spotted like a right Wally, and then ends up having to disguise herself as a volunteer lab rat to evade security, and soon gets slapped with a new experimental drug patch. And after slipping out the back to hook up Tuck's tech to complete her part of the mission, she starts going all woozy herself. And the drug is so powerful it makes her change aspect ratio. And she soon sees super portentous imagery like her mum in the kitchen doing some cooking. And I can totally relate. Because I used to get triggered by my mum in the kitchen after school and wondering how many burnt potato smileys I'd have to choke on that evening.
Damn!
But anyway, once little John snaps her out of it and changes her back to her normal screen proportions, they promptly get the heck out of Dodge now the local filter turns up. And after they release more gas than AOC on a live radio show, Robyn and little Jonathan soon seem trapped in the back room. But luckily, they manage to trick the dopey ginger by leaving their mask on top of a small box and then make a run for it in the back of a stolen truck. And still in a state of delirium, Robyn totally forgets about her secret crush on her mum's lesbian lawyer and soon plants a smacker on her baldy bae, as the Hood deliver the Asian pharmacist a pallet of medicine direct from the manufacturer. So naturally, she gets busy delivering it straight to the desperate residents, whilst totally restoring the reputation of the Hood lot what love stealing from legitimate businesses to fix a problem what their own antics created.
Fair enough. Yeah, I mean, fair enough. I'm a little lost, but fair enough.
Meanwhile, Tressie tells Robyn that she needs to step up now she's lost more feeling in her lower back than an ageing porn star, and she can't be out smoking with her friends when they've got rent to pay and stews to make. And later, Tuck reveals that he hacked Thanasia's system and totally released all their dirty secrets, meaning that they won't be able to screw over local residents no more, nor work with evil white capitalist John Prince and the Ginger Sheriff to expose the Hood and shit. And said Ginger Sheriff just can't believe that she's been made to look a right mug yet again by a bunch of kids in neon gimp masks, and her next plan is going to totally get them all real good and proper. And that's it. That's episode 4. Though my favourite part was how Tressie says at the end that the Hood fellas don't really deserve much credit, given they simply cleaned up their own mess after their earlier troublemaking gave companies an excuse to make prices soar and thereby screwed over their own community. Nor does she appreciate how the solution to such a problem was the Hood committing even more fucking crimes, and all to offset their earlier criminal actions what got them into this situation in the first place. But anyway, on to episode 5. We start with a straight white male acting like an immature brat, given the writers clearly despise Caucasians on this show. And Chet's peed off because his rich capitalist daddy can't be asked to go to his super excessive and absurdly extravagant birthday party tonight. Whilst over in Sherwood, Alan is hanging out with a local homeless bloke and jamming to the most basic nondescript tune, whilst gaslighting his mate into believing that he's got a bona fide hit on his hands and it'll totally go straight to number 1 on the trending list if he uploads it to the YouTubes and shit. And before he can say, okay, but I can't even afford an internet connection, bro, Alan jumps on a bus and sods off for the day before he gets asked to donate to his lecky bill. And Chet then pulls up to check out the grotty Sherwood place and to see why his daddy is so obsessed with this random estate. And before he can say, I can't believe my father would rather spend his time hanging around a bunch of peasants rather than attend his own son's special celebrations, he offers said homeless bloke 300 quid to get in his car already, because he's totally got a private gig he can do for him. And naturally, the broke-ass busker bloke's a little reluctant to just get in an expensive vehicle being driven by a privileged rich kid with clearly bad intentions, but decides to anyway because even the homeless have got to eat, and no fucker even tipped him after his last performance playing shit songs on a small bench. Anyway, after the opening titles, Robyn bumps into that phony fakey Maid Marian Bird, who's in town working on Tressie's case. And after Robyn casually mentions how they're currently doing a clothing drive in the local community hall, said Maid Marian Bird promptly disrobes. But before she can get her kecks out and thereby potentially making this show actually worth watching for a change, that stinky homeless bloke bursts in and a rights drop, and totally refuses to talk to his mate Alan about what's caused him to look like he's been interfered with and now more moody than Billie Eilish on her time of the month. And shockingly, the gang soon watch a YouTube video of Chet and his goons totally taunting the homeless bloke what they lured into their vehicle with a quick flash of cash, and then smashing up his precious guitar for shits and giggles.
Bruh.
Naturally, Alan just can't be having that, cause going around and doing a public service by saving the local neighbourhood from having to endure shit songs every time they wait at the local bus stop just ain't fucking on, son. So they soon come up with a plan to rob Chet's birthday party tonight and totally give him a taste of his own medicine.
Nice.
But robbing Prince's penthouse for the second time in weeks and thereby recklessly and literally returning to the scene of their previous crime just ain't enough for angry Alan, who is now proper itching to smack her bitch up, given they've hurt his little buddy, who he seems unnaturally close to despite us never having heard of him previously. And before they can say, why don't we just report him to the police, given he's just uploaded evidence of a crime, and so this should be a pretty open and shut case for the freckly ginger sheriff and also earn us some goodwill in the process, Robyn just says we're mostly peaceful good guys, bro, and the hood don't go around smacking people up, because we just break into their homes and steal all their stuff, and presumably leave them super traumatised and feeling unsafe in their own homes and shit. And if we cross the line into physical violence, like shooting up ex-cons with unlicensed arrows, then we'll totally become no better than the bad guys. Later, Robyn has a cheeky smooch with that little Jonathan fella whilst getting dressed for the night, before then describing the super genius scheme to Alan and Much with the aid of a hilariously basic depiction of the target's floor plan. And after the pair receive some staff disguises sourced from one of their vague and shady contacts, they head straight up to the shindig, but annoyingly find Chetty Boy's late to his own party. And worse, Maid Marion's here, and Fitzwalter soon takes Robyn aside to say she's here working on her mum's case, and trying to dig up evidence that John Prince and that naughty sheriff bird are totally working together and stuff. And before you can say, well, why wouldn't they be, given the rich guy's been robbed at Arrow Point and had his home broken into and expensive motor stolen? Robyn seems a little suspicious, but soon tells her gang that they can't do the whole robbery thing whilst her mum's useless lawyer is hanging around like a bad smell. So after human cartoon Chet finally arrives and obnoxiously demands his presence already, Robyn says she's going to create a distraction so the gang can go nick all his birthday gifts from the back room already. Or some shit. And after reassuring a worried and clingy John that she'll be totally fine, and then saying she's going to go help Mary and Snoop about a bit whilst they're here, given they might find something to help her mother's case, Robyn promptly gets her mum's fine-ass lawyer in the middle of the dance floor, and soon schools her in the art of lesbian seduction via the means of erotic whining. What just looks rather like my dog when he's trying to itch his bum on the kitchen floor to get rid of his worms. And whilst the jealous little Jonathan pines on from the sidelines, the gang take their chance and head in to the back room whilst all eyes are on the stunning and brave chocolate ladies, who are about 3 songs and 2 shots away from scissoring in the centre of the dance floor.
Oh, good lord!
But unfortunately, Chet's locked all his shit away in a safe. And after Alan unironically wonders why the guy whose house was broken into a few weeks back by a gang of hooded youths who robbed his dad's stuff would ever do such a crazy and paranoid thing, a sozzled Chet suddenly bursts in on them doing a bunch of bad things. But luckily, the ex-army medic totally chokes him out, and leaving poor Alan super frustrated, because he was told they weren't allowed to do physical violence on the guy who loves harassing homeless folks, and he would have loved to wring his neck if that option was apparently on the table. But Much says stop fantasising about physically violating drunk young men and get your head together, pal. Cause if Marion and Robyn are found here together, then it'll be super bad for her mum's case because reasons. But also, luckily, he hadn't seen their faces yet, so they totally pack him up in a nearby crate and haul his unconscious ass the heck out of Dodge already. And after taking him to what appears to be the empty construction site from the first epi, where they love to shoot shitty music videos, the hood fellas tie him up and totally bollock him for messing around with local vagrants what just want to make music on a small bench, and now he's in a world of trouble, son. Meanwhile, the 2 luscious lesbos break into Prince's office looking for clues, despite whatever they find in this way surely being inadmissible in court, before Marion sticks a random USB stick into his laptop which just lying around. And who knows, if she plays her cards right, then that might not be the only slot that's going to get filled with a stiff and solid instrument inserted by a lesbian woman tonight. Whilst back at the building, Much teases little John about being totally jealous of Robyn's new cutesy floozy. But he just copes harder than Feige fanboys, thinking the review embargo on the upcoming Captain Marvel sequel is just so Disney can avoid spoilers leaking and not that it's going to be an unmitigated shit show. And says she was just doing that distraction thing, so shut up about it already. Also, meanwhile, Chet's totally laughing about smashing up some hobo's crappy guitar and doesn't really get why this fella's having a pussy old meltdown about it all. And after he further tries to play it down and insists it was all just a joke, bro, a comically overreacting Alan totally launches himself at the guy, which thereby allows his prisoner to escape and get his dopey ass locked in his own cell.
No!
But luckily, he quickly smashes his way out somehow and instantly catches up to him also somehow. And after Chet finds a moment to try and call his mates, but just overhears them talking about how much of a little bitch he is and that they only hang around with him because he's totally loaded, we cut back to the party, where the girls hear someone coming up outside about to burst in on them. So naturally, the lazy hack writers go full cliche and make the ladies les off with each other to totally fool the unexpected guest. And ROBYN soon gets in her second snog of the day. No fair, because I can't even get 2 in a year. Liberties! And before you can say, why would the sight of 2 hot totty lesbos getting freaky in a penthouse make the guy go away instead of pulling up a chair and getting the lube and popcorn out? Marion pulls out her flash drive, which seems to have finished downloading something, but then suspiciously tries to pretend it was nothing.
Okay.
Whilst the Hood then find their escaped hostage busted up on the stairs. And he just can't believe what a shit birthday this is turning out to be, given he apparently fell down them off screen. And before I can say, well, that's one way to save on the stunt budget, I guess, but why can't they save on the overall production budget by just not making this show at all? They convinced Chetty Boy to promise never to go near the Sherwood estate ever again. And after tragically conceding that his so-called friends seem to despise hanging out with him more than his own father does, Alan says he's totally got an idea about how he can make it up to that homeless bloke what he humiliated the other day. So, returning to the party, Chet promptly boasts about how he totally knows the Hood peeps and that they can all be in their super cool new music video if they all just pretend to be getting robbed and shit. And before they can say, yeah, nice try mate, but you think we were born yesterday, they immediately dump all their valuables in the phony fakey robbers' sacks, and then hilariously all act surprised when they realise they've somehow been swindled for real. And after Chet successfully takes his revenge and sits on an actual throne on top of a penthouse, we cut to the next morning, as the super cool and expensive designer clothes what the partygoers all just handed over have now appeared in the community hall's donation bin overnight and courtesy of the Hood. And presumably, the writers apparently reckon it totally doesn't count as stealing if these dopey fuckers just handed over all their stuff on false pretences. And I guess our heroes are now just going to redistribute the proceeds of crime what they robbed innocent rich people of, and thereby make the poor local community accomplices to their thievery. Communism. And we end with a homeless bloke happily waltzing in with a tacky new jacket and a fresh guitar. And after Alan runs off with him for a jamming session out back, and presumably to give him a quick blowy given how obsessed he seems to be with this random hobo, Marion turns up and says she had fun sucking the face off her client's daughter last night and they should totally do it again sometime. And ROBYN just says, yeah bro, because you taste like chocolate. And also, you were a well good actor thinking on your feet and giving us a last minute phony fakey cover story by opportunistically forcing yourself on my body without my consent. And after that little cuck fella asked what the heck she was doing here, given how he's now a love rival to a small legal lesbian, ROBYN says, I don't know bro, but it certainly wasn't to snog my face off again, which we totally didn't do last night given you and I seem to have a thing potentially possibly going on. And also, I don't think we can trust her since she's overly protective with dodgy USB drives and shit. And that's it. That's episode 5. Though my favourite part was when the desperate to remain anonymous gang member Alan got so angry when confronting Chet about bullying his busking bum buddy that he recklessly took off his own mask to shout in his hostage's face.
Not a great plan.
But anyway, that's a plot and that's your lot. Considering that mail thing so you don't miss any future recaps. Tell me if you like this show in the comments if you have time, and I'll see you in the next one.